Hi Tanya, sorry you had some difficulty with this assignment. Certainly, losing some of your chemistry just to a spill is unfortunate. And having had more prints to work with, I think that you would have had better overall exposures. One of the things that I think also, well, two things that caused some challenging for issues for you. First was that when you said you edited these in Photoshop, but you didn't actually make them into negatives, and you asked the people at Home Depot to do it. That was definitely a mistake. You should have made your own negatives, and some of the things that affected your printing would have been much more noticeable had you taken the time to do that yourself. And you could have made some changes prior to having your transparencies made. I'm assuming these are the transparencies that came to sitting on white paper. And the first thing I see is that you didn't change them to black and white. You can use colored negatives to make cyanotypes, however, I really don't suggest it. And one of the reasons why is because it masks issues that you're going to have. So if we look here at this, where are we? At the edit 6 here, what we see is that your crystal on the pedestal, your leaves stand out very, very well against the gray of your background, whatever that is. And that's because they're in color versus black and white. Once you convert everything to black and white, everything starts to blend in. And so what that means is you're going to have very narrow margin where this is going to be properly exposed, but this is going to render. Once you start to go a little over, everything's going to be blue. And that's exactly what we saw in this image 7286, where we can see a little bit of the highlight here, and a little bit of the highlight here that represents this area and this area. Everything else, and we can actually see a little bit of the texture of your couch. I'm guessing what this is. It looks like a fabric. Everything else is pretty much not rendered properly. Again, had you made this conversion yourself, you would have seen these blend in pretty well. Using a black and white adjustment layer, then you could have tweaked this. You could have brightened up the yellows, because yellow is obviously a very prominent color here. You could have brightened up the greens. And then we start to see huge contrast in luminosity values, which is really the key here, between your subject matter and the background. Then from here you could convert everything to negative. You go back to your background layer, edit, adjustment, invert. And now you see things, well, okay, maybe not quite as much as we hope for separation between the crystal and the bottom here. So then what we might do is a little bit of a curves adjustment layer. And what we'll do is we'll brighten up this part. And we'll activate this click and drag. Click here, drag up, and we see we kind of brighten everything up. And obviously this is not what we want. But the beauty of using an adjustment layer is that you can modify it. From here we would take the brush, and we're going to go with a pretty heavy flow and opacity, just because we're going to be sloppy and quick for the sake of this tutorial. But of course, the more time that you spend on this, the better it's going to be. And we kind of see what's happening here is obviously this is the exact opposite of what we want. But again, we can just kind of get in there quick and dirty, and then invert this mask. And so that's just the same thing, and this time we'll use a keyboard shortcut of Control or Command I. And so we start to see how we build differences. So okay, maybe going here, I decided I didn't like what I did up here. Now I'll paint with black, and I'll just get rid of that. And so you can see how you can kind of play with it while it's still a negative stage. And once you get that contrast that you want, then you print your negative. Then you're going to have much better time managing your exposures, because you're going to take your period of underexposed to overexposed and kind of stretch that out a little bit, so you have a little bit of leeway. Looking at this one here, pretty similar. The crystal is going to blend in with the background. We just kind of invert this to begin with, add our little black and white adjustment layer, and you can see how it kind of blends. So these are the kinds of edits that you needed to have done prior to going to Home Depot. This one turned out pretty well because we have relatively dark crystals against a relatively bright background. We see actually some really hot spots here in your background, and that comes through in your print as well. And we see that here. Again, a little bit overexposed, which you knew about, and you know how to address that. But those are the overall things that you want to work with. Your best one here is, I think, by far this 2871, and that goes with edit 3. Again, big contrast between your main subject and your background. That's the key here. We even see a little bit of detail of the wood here, and I think that turned out pretty well. So just recap, exposure issues definitely, but you know that. Having some extra chemistry would have absolutely helped. The big key though is making sure that you have your negatives as good as possible before you print them, because having your negatives in good shape will help ensure you have good exposures. Let me know if you have any questions.